All right. Welcome, Nishant, to my startup podcast here. Thanks for joining me. It's been some time since we talked back in, I think, maybe February. We were
hmm
at a dental startup tech event that I was hosting. You haven't
hmm
gone towards the dental route, but a different route. But yeah, how have you been since then? And how's everything going?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. I think that was in February. I was exploring startups, seeing what I wanted to do next, and ended up getting into Y Combinator in March. Initially, it was just an idea, didn't really have a strong idea of what we wanted to do. I think what mattered to me more was finding the right person to work with. So found a solid co-founder, applied to YC, got in, and started with a few different ideas, but eventually landed on this AI for QA thing, and just been heads down on this ever since.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really exciting. Congrats on getting into YC, of course, one of the most well known and top incubator accelerators. So that's huge. And it's funny because we were talking about I was giving out advice on how to come up with a startup idea, but I realized in hindsight maybe I should have asked you because you must have had a pretty good idea to get in. But no, I still think that the social media groups that we talked about them is a good way. But yeah, before we hop into all that, do you mind just tell me a bit about your background. How did you get into the startup or tech space? And are you from the New York area originally? Just see a bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in Canada, was born in India, family immigrated to Canada when I was fairly young. Most of my childhood was in Canada. Went to the University of Waterloo in Canada as well. Pretty large STEM school over in Canada, studied computer science there. I think the Waterloo program is set up in a very good way for students to build real tangible skills because they do this co-op program where in order to for you to graduate, it's a part of your degree requirement is you must do these co-op terms, which are essentially internships. And for the computer science program I was in, I had to do six of these co-op terms. So six different internship experiences in around 4 months each. That's pretty much 2 years of like real industry experience that you get exposed to prior to even having graduated. And ton of benefits to that. One, you get to try different things and figure out what you actually like and what resonates with you. Because most of the learning typically happens in that first 4 month period, right? Like the learning curve usually looks like this, and then it sort of plateaus off. So that was really great. Tried a bunch of different things. Kind of ended up mostly in the back end distributed systems space most of the time, and it's found that's what I enjoyed the most. So that was the start of my software engineering career. Did a bunch of intern at a few different companies. Like the most notable ones were like Shopify, GitHub, AWS, and Brex. Got a return offer to work full time at Brex, so I worked there for a few years. That's when I moved to New York as well. And after Brex, I joined Stripe on the API services team, where we worked on tooling to power API, Stripe's API infrastructure. And I was at Stripe for a few months, like 8, 9 months, when we had. I feel like I always knew I wanted to do a startup. I was more so just waiting to
Yeah,
find the right person to work with. And my co-founder Boris, great guy, super technical. We align on many things, and one of them was both wanting to build a startup. So once that happened, we applied to YC, and that's how we ended up here.
that's great. Yeah, you mentioned how you had the co-ops at your college, and I think that definitely is a huge difference because what I hear people often say in CS degrees is that I learned a lot of computer science, but I didn't learn how to program as much, like the actual building things. And so it's good to have that practical practice actually building something. And I know that one college in the U.S. that has really prioritized the co-ops, Northeastern, they've done very well because all of their
hmm
their uh, their students that graduate, they're getting great jobs. And so I think the
hmm
acceptance rate's down to like 5% now there. So they've really
hmm
boosted their quality by just focusing on actually getting people good jobs with the co-ops. But so did you meet your co-founder at Stripe, or was that somewhere else?
No, I actually met him through one of my internships. This was in 2021. I was interning at Amazon Web Services in Vancouver,
Okay,
and my co-founder Boris went to the University of Guelph. For him, that was just summer internships, like how internships traditionally work, where you get the summer term off and you look for a job. So he ended up at Amazon in Vancouver as well. And that's kind of where we met. It was funny. We weren't on the same team, but our projects were very similar. Were essentially implementing nearly the same thing. It was this kind of testing infrastructure, but for two different teams. And we just kind of bonded over that.
Okay, yeah. And I think that starts to touch on what your idea was. So let's jump into that now. What is your startup idea that you're working on in YC, and how did you come up with that?
Yeah, we're building AI agents for web testing. So it's these synthetic users that you give some instructions to, and they'll go and test your web application like a real human would. The, the technology for this has gotten extremely good over the last year, where you truly
Okay.
just prompt it and it can use your computer like a real human. And there's a ton of hours that go into manual QA still, where humans are doing this laborious task of getting some acceptance criteria and having to click through web applications repetitively just to make sure things are working as expected. So we're just automating that using AI.
Yeah, and for those that haven't worked directly in software, the way things work is that developers create the code, and then there's a QA team that manually, or often manually, somewhat automated tests things afterward to make sure that there are no bugs. And so you've created an AI that can help with this. And so, um, yeah, no, that's great because I know having worked on a software team for the past 7 years, it seems always a big problem is that the developers can create a new feature, but then in a certain amount of time, but then it seems to take longer to test that than they create it, just because you create one feature and there are multitudes of different ways that could be used or interfaced with through different workflows, and so it ends up being that the QA team is always sort of lagging behind a bit the dev team. So they definitely need help with that automation, and certainly because it's also can be very tedious work. So that's great. And okay, so you said the technology is doing very well. It's improving rapidly. Do you run into any of the big pitfalls or the big challenges that we're seeing with LMs, like hallucination or consistency? Is it robust enough to get around those?
Yeah, it's most of the way there. I would say like 99% of the way there, but there are misclicks that will happen occasionally and some hallucinations. They're quite rare nowadays, but that's part of the art of working in
Yeah,
the AI space so early. You have to build robust infrastructure around this and being able to handle these really well when something does go wrong, or if often sometimes Anthropic servers are overloaded and we have to build like solid retry mechanisms where we like slowly retry and don't just drop the request for the customer. So there are that's kind of the main challenge, one of the main challenges in this vertical AI space, especially around technology, where AI, like these models aren't fully deterministic, but sometimes, and
mhm,
including in the testing space, customers just want a deterministic result and they just
yeah,
want the same thing to see again and again, especially in testing where you're like, hey, it's the same prompt, but like, why did it click this button once, but this other button the other time? And sometimes it's the prompt and you're just not being specific enough. But occasionally you might run into something where the AI does a misclick and there's multiple tools we've built to help that with that and prevent that. One is just infrastructure around retrying and error handling and crisis management. Other is we're working on building solid caching functionality. So if you get a one solid test run, how do you make sure the next time the same test runs, it takes a similar deterministic path, which has a few advantages too. Like if it's cached, it'll run faster, it'll cost us less, so we can improve our margins a little bit too.
okay. So let me see if I understand what you're saying. So say you have a certain workflow that you've set up in your product. Uh, we're using your AI to test that workflow. So we test it one time, it runs through it in a certain way, and then you're caching that output that it did and reusing that. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah,
So
so we haven't released our caching right now. Right now, it is a fresh
okay,
run every single time where it behaves
gotcha.
like a real user. And some customers don't actually want caching because they like that it interprets the
That variability,
prompt
yeah,
you get prompt you've given it in different ways because real users are not
Right.
deterministic,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like you're going to go through the same path every time. You might get curious and click a different button. So some customers actually like prefer this more like synthetic user sort of testing, whereas others just want the like, hey, give me the same clicks and again and again, and just use AI to help me make these tests.
Yeah. Yeah. No, anything that could possibly go wrong, someone will try it out this way or that way. So it's good to have that
Yeah,
variability in there for sure.
yeah,
Um, so you moved from New York out to out west to for YC, right? And how's
yeah.
that been so far? Have you met a lot of people out there that are work on similar things that you're able to collaborate with, or maybe are our customers, are they already warmed up to the idea of this kind of product where it's easier to sell to them? What's the market like?
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally. I would say all of the above. I think San Francisco is definitely the place to be building, especially in the B2B space to be,
yeah,
and like an AI startup place to be. You just learn so much more by the tech community here. Like if a
yeah,
new model comes out, you're going to hear about it 6 to 8 months before anyone, and even New York. And New York is a huge
yeah,
tech hub as well. I used to live
right,
in New York, and just like coming, like after moving to SF, it's night and day. I thought I was working as a software engineer, been a software engineer my whole career. I thought I knew a lot about AI, but you come here and you're like, wow, I know nothing. And I felt like we were learning from scratch and just kept playing catch up. So there's, I
yeah,
think, tremendous leverage in coming out to San Francisco if you want to build a tech startup, both from the hearing about tech first. Another one is customers, like you mentioned. A lot of other startups and tech forward companies are here who are going to be your early customers and your early adopters who are willing to take risks on
right,
new startups and new technologies to see if they can move their bottom line. And third, which you also touched on, is community. I think Y Combinator certainly helps with that. You're put in a room in this incubator with like a few hundred very like-minded people that are very driven and really want to make their startups work. So, and doing a startup is pretty hard. So being in that
yeah,
environment is really reassuring that you feel like you're constantly doing the right thing. And like if you are struggling with something, you can lean on support and ask others and how they solve those problems. That's been extremely beneficial as well. So certainly I would agree. I think one thing I will say initially when I was moving from New York to SF, I wasn't too stoked just because when I visited SF in the past, to me, it didn't even compare to New York. Like, I still think New York is one of the best cities in the world, but just something about doing a startup and like that's both me and my co-founder, like we're super obsessed with making this startup work, and that's all we think about, and that's all a bunch of other people here think about as well. So then it feels like we fit in, and it feels like the right place to be. But I think if I wasn't doing a startup, I'd probably still like to be in New York.
yeah. Yeah, no, I was wondering how much of a difference does it make? You know, we have a pretty big city here in New York. There's a lot going
Yeah.
on, a big tech hub, and along the same lines, I was wondering, is it worth moving out there? So it's good to hear from you to hear direct feedback on what it's like out there, all those little things along the way that help you. I know even myself, when I posted in a Facebook group to find dentists to try out my product. The one dentist that was willing to give me a lot of time and try things out was out of San Francisco. And so I wonder if that's part of that
Hmm.
culture to try things out, to be on the cutting edge, new technology, even down to just, anyone that might be willing to try things out makes a big difference. So yeah, no,
Totally.
it's definitely something that I myself should think about. And do you mind just telling me a bit more about the YC process? How has that been so far? How do they onboard you, and what stage are you done with it right now, or are you still in it?
Yeah, it's only a 2.5, 3 month program. I believe it's only like 10 weeks now. The way it's set up is you get a group partner who is the person who funds you. They give you some early funding. And the few, I would say, primary benefits for us had been one, the community that you get access to, two, the resources. Like YC has seen the startup playbook or seen multiple, like thousands of startups in the past. They know what works, they know what doesn't. They're able to
Yeah,
pattern match really quickly. And
right.
if you're going down like a very common pitfall that they've seen before, they're able to point it out really well. So they kind of have the startup playbook down packed. And someone who doesn't come from a startup background and someone who had just worked at big tech companies their whole career, it is really beneficial to have that ecosystem around you. So the resources are tremendously helpful. Three, I would say the mentorship is beneficial as well.
Yeah.
the group partners, and you kind of have these biweekly office hours where you spend 30 minutes with them, and then also biweekly office hours with your little group of other companies where you set weekly goals on, hey, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to increase my revenue by X dollars. And that is also really motivating once you like say out loud, like, hey, I'm going to try to achieve this. And 2 weeks later, you're going to have to come back, sit in this room and talk about
Right.
whether you achieved it or not. And if you didn't, what went wrong, how you could have done things differently. So that, I can't think of the word right now, but the word for check-in, I guess we could call it, um,
Right.
is
Yeah,
really
that
beneficial.
accountability, right?
Accountability, yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's the word
yeah,
I was looking
you
for.
know that, and that social pressure of knowing that someone's going to evaluate you based on what you committed to and what you've actually done. It's stressful. It gives you anxiety, but it does give results. So I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, exactly. The accountability is super beneficial and the social pressure. And then the last thing is they help you raise your seed round, where it all kind of ends up with the demo day, which is this big event, one day where a ton of investors are invited, top investors from Silicon Valley and around the world come, and you get to pitch your startup to them and get a ton of inbound from investors who are interested in investing in your company.
That's great. And so, of course, not everyone is able to go through YC, but is there a way that you think we could learn to avoid those pitfalls, even if we don't make it into YC? Is there a way? I know there's a YC lecture series online. I've watched through some of those, and that's I think that saved me from some pitfalls. So, yeah, any suggestions
Yeah,
there?
yeah, I would say honestly, most of YC's resources are published online. Like what
Okay,
you
yeah,
learn in the batch, there's no like secret sauce. They've like most of the things they've learned, they've made YouTube videos on
yeah,
or put on their website or put in a Polygram essay. It's literally them just repeating that
right,
same exact advice to you when you're going through the thick of it. I think Dalton Caldwell, who's like one of the YC partners, puts it
yeah,
really
yeah,
well, where he says, it's kind of like what a basketball coach says to a team when they're in a huddle. If you like listen in on the conversation, the basketball coach is like, hey, go get the rebound, or
yeah.
like hustle towards the ball, where it's like nothing crazy or revolutionary, but it's when you're really just going through it and nothing's working, you just need to hear that basic advice from a third party who has a very bird's eye view on what you're doing, and that's really beneficial.
Yeah, when you're under the stress and strain, when you're in a valley feeling demotivated, it's easy to wander away from those best practices. So even just having someone repeat it makes a big difference. But
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, and you mentioned that you had a mentor. Who would you say was your biggest mentor for this startup? Is it your actual YC mentor, or is it someone else outside of it?
Yeah, certainly. I think for now, it's definitely been our group partner, Aaron Epstein. He's been tremendously helpful
Okay,
throughout the batch. The batch is over now. It's been over for about 2 months, but during the batch, he made us avoid many common mistakes. Initially, we were trying to do a completely different idea, and he was kind of like, I don't know, guys, like, how are you going to make money with this thing? You should really
yeah.
consider doing something else. And that's actually how we eventually ended up to this AI for QA testing idea.
Okay, so he already did kind of encourage a course correct there. What was the original idea? I'm curious.
Yeah, we had a couple of different original ideas. So what we got into YC with was this DocuSign competitor. It was this AI powered DocuSign and e-signature platform. And we built that out for literally first 2, 3 weeks of the batch, and even had some early paying customers, which was great. But eventually just learned that people were using us because we were 10x cheaper than DocuSign. No one was
Okay.
really using us because we were 10x better. And a lot of folks have already built out their DocuSign workflows. Like the larger DocuSign contracts from these Fortune 500 companies are all using these like APIs where it's like, hey, you click a button and it takes some information from maybe your Salesforce or whatever other integration, puts it into the document and sends it off for signature. And sure, we could make that workflow a bit better with AI, but you can't really make it 10x better because it is a pretty
Uh,
simple offering. And for them to, and if we're like, hey, we'll charge you half, but they're like, oh, it's like you said, only really charges me couple thousand bucks a month, like
yeah,
doesn't really make a huge impact on our balance sheet. And the cost of me having to switch over to your platform and expend resources to do that is probably greater than
right.
me just continuing to pay DocuSign. So didn't find too much alpha there. Then started thinking about the whole RevOps and billing space. And do you think do you think there was a business to be built there? And we were getting some traction. We were about to go to some conferences, but eventually just had this realization and learning, and also from Aaron's advice, thinking about what we actually wanted to work on. And both my co-founder and I are extremely technical and don't know much about RevOps and billing and sales, like
Okay, yeah,
operations space. So we asked ourselves like, hey, like what did we hate about our jobs? And naturally testing
yeah,
came up. That was one of the
right,
things not many developers like doing. And what we also liked about our current idea a lot is we could be extremely opinionated on what a good solution looks like because we would be the ideal users of this product. Whereas for RevOps or SalesOps or DocuSign, we would have to learn those workflows. So not only would we have to spend time building and marketing and
right.
doing sales, but also like building that base level knowledge of what the product should be. So
Sure.
that was kind of our initial YC journey in navigating a couple not so great ideas and eventually ending up on something that we are pretty excited about.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's what I've often heard is that it's a big advantage to come in with domain knowledge. So if you have those technical skills plus the domain knowledge of, whatever niche within that technical space, in this case testing, then that's a big advantage. And so before I was mentioning QA, but are you guys doing more like dev testing or both QA and dev testing? Like, or are you focusing on one or the other?
Yeah, our primary focus is these synthetic users for a moment, and where we're seeing most value out of them is
Okay,
replace it. Like it's kind of an additional QA engineer on your team. So
gotcha.
these companies that still have manual QA testers on their team, instead of hiring another one, they might consider using our tool and have their existing QA team write tests on our platform and run them at scale.
Got it. And so before you mentioned how, of course, you applied with the DocuSign type of idea, and eventually you guys pivoted, but you must have had a good application though. For those applying to YC, do you have any tips for them for how how to market an idea in order to be seen?
Yeah, so I think our case was I don't think we really got in based on our idea. I don't think our group partner necessarily loved our idea, but I
Okay,
think we just got in based on our backgrounds. Like
right.
we're both highly technical, and YC really cares about having a very high technical talent density on the initial founding team, just because you need to go through so many iterations. And if you're outsourcing the technical work, then you're eventually just going to run out of money before you even find any
Yeah,
sort of product market fit. So I think the main one tip I could give is make sure you have some
yeah,
technical talent on your team. And if you don't, then make sure you have some crazy, unique insight that no one else can just like search up on the internet. Like it just comes from you being super deep in the industry or having a ton of domain
right.
knowledge or having done 1,000 different user interviews. Those would probably be my top two, or third three if you just have like insane traction. If you're like, started 6 months ago and are doing 1 million in annual revenue, then it's like hard to turn that down, right? You're clearly
Right.
found something that works.
Yeah. Yeah, no, all sound advice, I think. That makes sense. Um, okay, so looking forward, what would you say is your ultimate vision for your company? Where do you see it going? Are you going to stay in the testing area and ultimately just automate all testing, or are you going to branch out from there into other spaces?
Yeah, we want to automate all testing. Like in the future, we don't think
Yeah,
we don't think any testing will be needed. And a couple
that's great.
limitations to that now are probably cost has started to come down, but latency of these LLM models is still too high for it to be part of the dev loop. So what's happened already is everyone uses AI to write their code. You like prompt it and you say, hey, this is what I want. to do, and then Cursor or Claude or someone will write that code for you. And then you have to go in on your, if it's a backend thing, maybe you'll do Postman and hit your backend endpoint and see if it worked. Or if it's just a UI change, maybe you'll open up a local host, go through your web applications, see what Cursor outputted for you. But in the future, that second part of you testing what was outputted by the AI will also be automated, where it'll take
Okay.
that prompt that was given, output some code, and then use that same prompt and put it into something like Docket, or Docket will be integrated directly into Cursor, and then go ahead and test that code for you and use the output of that code and feed it back into the prompt. If it like was good, then it's like, okay, great. I don't need to do anything else. This worked. If it didn't work, it'll say like, hey, I clicked this button and this is what actually happened, but this is what I expected to happen, and put that back into Cursor and say, hey, this is the result of the code you wrote for me. This is why it's wrong. Can you fix it? And people already do that, right? But they just do it manually today, where, especially in the UI case, if you're writing up some, you're coding up some React and you're prompting Cursor to make a UI for you, and then it comes out, but it doesn't really look the way you want it to. People already like will take a screenshot of the page, put it back into Cursor, and be like, hey, this is what you gave me, but I wanted it to look like this. Like, oh, there's like 3 buttons, but I only wanted 2. Can you fix it for me? But imagine if that was completely automated as well, where you don't even have to do that testing part. So that's in the code generation bit. And then once your code is actually live and customers are using it, imagine where you don't even have to write any tests. You just like give a URL to your website and maybe write a few like high level prompts saying like, XYZ are the main flows I want tested. And then there's just 1,000 synthetic users just hammering your website and with going through different flows, clicking different buttons, who have deep understanding of what your web application is about and what it should be doing, and just tests it all for you. So that's the ultimate vision.
Yeah, no, I like that. I mean, really closing the loop of automation on the AI coding process by having it correct itself rather than having to reinsert the prompt results, the results in the AI. Yes, that solves one of the big reliability issues that we often see with AI, and you always have to course correct it. So, no, I like that idea. That sounds really cool. And what would you say will make your product at the forefront of its industry? So versus comparing it to what you're seeing, you said you saw a lot of other people doing sort of similar things or in the similar space out in San Francisco. And what would you say you guys are doing to stay at the forefront and really differentiate yourselves?
Yeah, I would say our approach is completely vision based, and some competitors are using the DOM and like augmenting, or like they're making it more deterministic where you still have to write out the steps. We're really leaning into the ease of use and usability, where it's
Uh,
literally just all plain English and it's just like a little paragraph that you can even speak into the platform, and it just takes that and pretends it's a real user and just goes and tests your website for you.
got it. And is there a target market that you guys are focusing on? Is it certain industries or certain size companies?
Yeah, so currently where we've had most success has been any company that still employs QA engineers. And the other one is generative AI companies, where their whole product is generating some AI content. And that's really useful because you don't know what's going to come out the other end. Like if, you're some image generation platform and the way to use your platform is like you prompt it saying, hey, generate me a red Ferrari or generate me a red car. And then you click generate, wait 2 minutes and see what comes out the other end. Like you need a human to kind of make sure what comes out the other end looks like a red car. But
Right.
if you replace that with AI, it's kind of just using AI to test AI. And that's also we've been seeing good pull from those markets as well. So those are the primary 2 spaces we're initially going after. But obviously, as the product evolves, we do foresee every software company being able to use Docket.
So how good is the AI at detecting? So you're saying an AI that produces an image, you would use AI to see does that image align with what the user wanted. So how does that work? Do you have to use maybe a different model than the one, or like a very different model than the one that generated it to kind of have a different perspective, or how does that work?
So we're not necessarily testing the quality of the customer's model. I think that would be a
Okay,
completely different product. That's like more of an eval testing product where it's like testing kind of A/B testing prompts. Like, oh, did this prompt result in a higher quality, higher resolution, or like more feature rich
got it.
car? We're kind of just testing the usability of it. Like, hey, in this like AI infrastructure you've built to output something out the other end, is it a reasonable output? So like when tomorrow
I
a real
see.
user goes through this flow, are they presented with a reasonable experience that isn't totally broken?
Okay, gotcha. And what kind of tech are you guys using to set up this framework? Is it yeah, yeah, if you want to just say that.
Sure, yeah. The main model is we're using Claude Sonnet 4,
Okay.
and the infrastructure, we're all on AWS, just running EC2 instances. We use Fargate to spin stuff up and down really fast. And we have like warm pool of workers ready to go. So we're able to spin up tests instantly. And front end's written in React, back end Python Flask, PostgreSQL is the database.
And to control the AI, are you using something like a LangChain or some framework there? Or
It's primarily we do use LangChain. Yeah, we use LangChain for
okay,
some of our prompting. Not all of it. Some of it is more custom where we wanted a lot more control over what we're putting in and how
I
we're
see.
dealing with the outputs. But yeah, we do use LangChain as well.
Okay, nice, nice. And I guess so. How big do you think the testing industry is, and where do you feel there's a lot of opportunity? There's more and more things to test, of course, with all the AI out there. There's
Mhm.
more and more things that could go wrong. So I could see a lot of AIs themselves needing more and more testing. Yeah, where do you see the industry going?
Yeah, certainly. I do think more code is being written than ever, right? Like it's now everyone, well, especially with like platforms like Lovable, everyone can build a software
Right.
startup and it's really easy. So now more and more like more code is being written than ever. And you kind of need this more, a lot more code is being written. There's not as many like testing tools. So this like testing is kind of a counterbalance to all this code that's being written. And this market is already growing a ton and I
Yeah.
do foresee it continuing to grow. And there's like shape of product, right? Like the shape of like synthetic user testing is valuable in not just like I've already shared a couple ways where one is like, yeah, build into the code generation loop. One is testing once your product is ready to find any bugs. Another is like user experience testing, where like, hey, there's no like bugs technically there's no bugs on your platform, but
Right.
the way you've built this dropdown is like really confusing. If you look at Docket, it took Docket like 5 clicks to figure out how to handle this component. And if Docket is trained on millions or like tens of millions of very intuitive UIs and it's struggling to use your experience, it probably means there's something off about it. And you can use that data to improve your user experience and eventually increase your conversion. So there is a different product shape that Docket could take in the next like 5 to 10 or even like next 2 to 3 years. But for now, we're just focusing on scaling this like help augment manual QA and go after generative AI companies' use cases.
Yeah, that's a really interesting concept of actually having it test the user experience, how intuitive it is. I was going to ask like how is that even how do you know it, how would it know that it's intuitive? But you brought up a great point, which is that if it's trained on so many things that are already out there, then those are the things that we're going to find intuitive because we've used them so many times. That's sort of almost built into training it on the most common websites. And yeah, no, that's great. As we have more and more people generating these apps with Replit, those kinds of platforms, then I'm sure that'll come in handy.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually came from like our one of our customers themselves. I was like, oh, hey, I
Oh,
noticed like
really?
Docket kind of like struggled with this drop down here. Do you want us to like help with that in terms of like some fine tuning or some prompting potentially? And they were actually like, no, I actually like that because it's pointing out that this is not as intuitive as some of the other components on our
Ah,
platform. So
nice.
that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Um, and what would you say are, like we said, starting a startup is hard. What would you say were some of the biggest challenges that you faced, or maybe the biggest challenge that you faced so far?
Biggest challenges we faced so far. I think there's been a ton,
It's
like
been challenges the whole
everything.
way, right?
Yeah, the whole thing's been a challenge,
Yeah,
which is part of the fun, right? Like
yeah,
nothing is obvious about this where it's like from the get-go, it's like, okay, we're doing this DocuSign thing. It's not really working. What should we do? Like coming up with a good idea is a challenge. And like, okay, how do we have this vague idea? How do we validate people actually want it? Trying to get people on the phone to talk about the
yeah,
idea was a challenge. And then we're like, okay, this makes sense. And then we start building it and they're like, wow, like there's like so many missing pieces. Like, sure, like there's a good Sonnet 4 model, but how do we build all this infra around it? There's all these technical challenges. Like, how do we be able to run 1,000 tests in parallel and like have like under 1 second boot up times for the containers we have? That's a technical challenge. And then once you maybe figure that out, then you're like, oh, okay, we have some early customers. People are kind of liking this. How do we scale our outbound go to market motion? How do we get more meetings on the calendar? That's also been a challenge. So, yeah, I think the whole thing has been a challenge. And like, yeah, it's something you wake up every day and maybe you get a message in Slack saying, like, oh, hey, guys, is this broken? Like, this doesn't seem to be working as we want it to work. And then
right,
you have to figure out what went there. So I think been challenges the whole way, but it's kind of why I'm doing it. I think that's very
right.
exciting. Like it's every day is something different and it kind of keeps you on your toes as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it was one of these Silicon Valley guys who's quoted saying like starting a startup's like waking up every morning getting punched in the gut. And so yeah, it's definitely challenges the whole way along. And is there something that they teach in YC or that you've learned to when you're, at one of these dead ends, it feels like it's hopeless. It doesn't see it feels like things aren't going to work out, that you get yourself up and go around that challenge or through it or whatever and yeah, figure out a way to just stay optimistic.
Yeah, I think no, I think it's a very personal thing. I don't think there's
Yeah,
universal advice around this. But one exercise we did during YC is like go around the room and everyone said why they're starting a startup, and everyone was just
yeah,
very blunt and honest about why they want to do it. And the advice was, hey, when shit gets hard, and it will get hard, just
yeah,
remember why you started doing this because you knew, like, you left your hundreds of thousands of dollars
yeah,
your job to come do this. So you knew it was not going to be like easy and you had some motivation on why you wanted to do it. So when stuff gets hard, just remember what that motivation was for you.
yeah, absolutely. And and yeah, what would you say, having gone through some of the very tough parts of starting a startup, having gone through YC, what wisdom or what advice would you impart to someone else who's trying to start a startup in those early stages, and who's struggling through it?
I mean, we're also struggling through it, so maybe
Yeah,
I'm not the best person to ask.
or
But
yeah, whatever you might think of.
probably just what I said earlier, know
Yeah,
why you're doing this.
right.
And it's like half of it is just a resilience game. I
Yeah,
think YC talks about how I think if you just based on the data that they have from having funded over 6,000 companies, if you just survive for 2 years, your
yeah,
odds of success go up by half. By 50%,
that's
you're
great.
just based, and that's based on real data. So just keep going. I think that's the
Yeah,
biggest advice. Like it's not easy. There's going to be challenges every day, and you just have to, yeah, keep going and keep getting through them.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. I ask that question at the end of each of these weekly podcasts, and I feel like the majority of times now everyone says persistence, and maybe that might be the number one thing for starting a startup. And we see with these AI models that one of the biggest flaws right now is that you can't just sit them down and let them solve a problem over the course of a year because they don't have that persistence. So a lot of things might just come down to persistence. If you keep on doing it, then eventually. Um, because there's no penalty for being wrong and then correcting it. You get something
Mhm.
wrong and then you continue and get it right, then okay, now you have it right and you can duplicate that infinitely in the future in your product. So So yeah, I think that persistence, both for us human beings and for these AIs, is a big part for successfully completing any test. So um,
Totally.
yeah, well, thanks, Nishant. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we sign off here?
No, I think that was all. I think we covered a lot of the startup journey. So I think you've gotten my life as a founder. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I've learned a lot myself from your own startup journey. Some things that I'll course correct on, and I'm excited for my my poor QA members that struggle to doing screenshots and paste them into Word documents and spending hours toiling doing that. That they'll be able to automate that, and hopefully they can take kind of more of a high level approach and organize these AIs to help them test. So that'll be great for them. But yeah,
Totally,
thank
man.
you.
Thanks.